done. Slamming Armored Fist, Crushing Fist, Retaliation, Vengeful Cry. Retaliate against a savage hit with a war cry, so you have to get hit chunked. Overexertion. Supports exerts, causing them to deal more damage per war cry exerting. Eviscerate, Arcing Slash, Retaliation. Swordstorm, Retaliation with a hail of blades. Expert Retaliation. Causes them to have more cooldown recovery rate and become usable for longer. New gem, Glacial Shield Swipe. Retaliate against a blocked hit. Okay, there's a lot of retaliation. Rupture, that's from the Deadeye. Divine Retribution, that's the lightning one we saw. Yeah, we saw that on the tree. Added 60 new armor bases. 18 helmets, 18 body armors, 12 gloves, 12 boots. Where's the meat and potatoes? Melee totems have been removed. To compensate, we have buffed every melee skill. Almost every melee skill. That's scary that it's only almost. Hold up, let me you can kill that, right? The following gems have been removed. Protector, War Chief, Earthbreaker Support. Points on these microtransactions will be returned to your account if you bought these. Dawn Strider Boots no longer give 100% effective totems. What do they do now? Socketed Slam gems are now supported by level 25 Earthbreaker and provide Ancestral Bond. These changes exist. 3 to 5% of your damage taken. It's so fucking bad. Alright. Good. Noted. A lot of totem tweaking stuff. Don't care. Some clusters in the bottom tree have been adjusted. Totem adjustments because they removed the totems. Banner reworks. Bannerman, Renowned Deeds cluster, blah, 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 blah. They changed the banner nodes. I want to see, like, the gem of the banner, right? Banners also cause enemies to take 8% increased damage. Recover 3% life. Banners maim enemies. Gain 5 valor whenever you war cry. Rage rework. 30 capped rage, but it's multiplicative damage, so 30% more damage. But you have to constantly be hitting stuff, otherwise you just decay like super fast. So anytime a boss teleports, you're probably losing your rage. Many sources of rage generate rage quickly. Rage effect. A number of rage-related stats have had their wording updated. Okay. Rage effect applies to damage inherently granted by rage and other bonuses granted per X rage, blah, blah, blah. Berserker Ascendancy is now dog shit. Oh, yeah, I saw that. The Chainbreaker, Timeless Keystone, and Combs Spirit unique gloves have been updated to state their rage regeneration stats do not delay the inherent rage loss. Bearer's Girdle no longer has damage increase per rage. This change affects it now has plus 10 max rage, which is it's okay. I don't think that belt's going to be any different. I don't think it's going to be good. Ravenous Passion no longer has rage, grants cast speed instead of attack speed. It now has gained 7 to 10 rage after spending 200 mana. Isn't this like... Alright, I'm confused. So rage is now 1% more attack damage per rage. Wait, it's not even how much... Rage doesn't even increase your damage, correct? Am I reading this correctly? Rage now grants 1% more attack damage per rage gained, which means your rage value doesn't matter at all. Is that correct? Am I understanding this correctly? That means rage... the number of rage on your character is irrelevant? Am I confused? Rage now grants 1% more damage per rage gained. Or is it just badly worded? The damage is still tied to the amount of rage. Okay, it's just badly worded. That is bad wording, because it's alright, whatever, we'll move on. It's fine. Rigwold Savagery now grants 10 max rage, cool. Other rage adjustment things across the board, whatever, 5 rage on hit, battle trance, max rage, we saw that. Looking for anything that matters. Every rage also grants, added a set of rage, these are the rage masteries, because there's rage clusters. 1% movement speed per 5 rage, that's whatever. Plus 7 to max rage, but the inherent loss of rage is 20% faster, that's probably pretty good. Warcries grant 1 rage per power, up to 5, that's useful. If you have rage, enemies are intimidated, that's useful. Maximum total life recoup from leech while maximum rage, that's probably pretty bad. Tinctures, I'm not going to look at these in detail. Tincture stuff, cool. Retaliation skills, these might actually be kind of OP, I'm not sure though. I could see them being used to proc like Giga Bleeds potentially or something, some cooked ass shit like that. I need to see the skill gems though. Retaliation skill, these are, where are the masteries? So these are the retaliation masteries that you can't see on the thing we're looking at. So 80% increased duration of elements. Debilitate for 3 seconds, that's 10% less damage like dealt by the enemy. 20% increased armor for each retaliation you've used within the past 10 seconds. That's a pretty long time. 40% less cost. 10% chance for when you use a retaliation skill for a different retaliation skill to become usable. That's weird. Okay. We saw the Nameless Seer stuff. They showed that T16, T17 map unlocked. That's the... They showed all this. King of the Mist stuff. Sentinel spawn in T16-17. Wildwood spawns in T16-17. They showed the new Scarabs and Chisel stuff. Monsters Guild from all league. Got the content now drop maps. I don't even know what that means, but whatever. Blight oils found in area are 1 tier higher. Instead, it now causes blight areas to have 1 blighted chest. Okay. Blight encounters in area spawn. Whatever. The Divination Scarab has been renamed to the Divination Scarab of the Cloister. It no longer provides 150% cards. It now causes an area to contain 8 to 12 packs of Dodri mobs with a 1% chance each to drop a stacked deck. Oh, okay. Curation has been replaced with 5 packs of mobs that drop cards, whatever. Final boss has increased toughness. Final map boss duplicates all stolen divination cards when deleted. So divination cards in area are stolen by the boss, and then the boss drops all the cards instead. Whatever. 2 additional apparition shrines instead of an unusual shrine. I didn't even use any of this shit. I know a lot of people were buying them for like the EXP Giga stuff. Okay. 10% more increased maps per map modifier affecting the area. Maps are found 1 tier higher up to tier 16. It actually is going to be the thing that I said that I was kind of not super excited about. It's going to be Path of Scarabs, probably. It's going to be a lot of buying Scarabs. Especially with 6 map slots. A lot of Scarab buying for sure. They nerfed the Harbinger, it looks like. Harbinger's an area to drop rare currency shards or to drop a single type of currency shard. So the big mirror shard thing is completely removed. So no more Harbinger OP strats, it looks like. What else? Reliquary Scarab. Unique monsters have 2% increased toughness, damage, rarity, and quantity of items per 1. Okay. So they get, the boss has, unique monsters have more rarity quantity per pack size. Okay. It no longer causes unique monsters in area to drop unique items down, cause unique monsters in area to have 2 additional rewards and 30% toughness, whatever. So many things. Scarab of Wisp has been doubled in value for how much Wisp juice is put into your map. Okay. Ritual altars and areas spawn a Wildwood Wisp. Okay. How much of this stuff is scarabs? Monsters in tier 17 maps have less life and deal less damage. Okay. Tier 17 are modifiable. Yeah, we saw that. Union of Souls map no longer spawns in T17 maps. That's probably good. Exclusive tier 17 map modifiers now have increased item rarity, and so they give more rarity and quantity. Sure, why not? Clusters and T17 maps has been removed. Double anointed amulets can now drop in Blight Ravaged maps. That one's weird. So it's like, can you anoint one of the mods, one of the anoints, or is it just like it drops double anointed and you're stuck with those 2 anoints? Or can you like change the first anoint or something, or does it override both? I have no idea. Right? So double anointed amulets is going to be really strong, but that's like RNG to find a good one. I don't know if it like you can anoint, like override the first anoint, or if like it just kills both if you try to anoint and you're just RNG hoping for like a giga double and then you roll it later. I don't know. Monsters and ultimatum encounters drop loot once again. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Some of Einhar, Beast Memories. Yeah, they talked about that. Black Morgon. Janus's Fortification Safe House reward is now a chest of Domination Scarabs. You now have a chance to find a Gloom Shrine or Charge Shrine in areas. Sure, Gloom Shrines are fun. Divine Shrines are now rare and only 20-second buff. Okay, sure. They talked about the Valdos. Lighthouse is back, but XD, right? Lighthouse is back, but XD to Berserker. Okay, whatever. Typical stuff. League mechanic improvements. They talked about some of this, so... Ritual Helmet now gives +2 to main gems, but -2 socket supported gems. That's probably good in some cases. The boot one is now what? It's stun related stuff, that's whatever. Debilitation gauntlets now do what? They add 5 to 6. Isn't that garbage? You get 5 to 6% extra block on gloves. You take 10% of damage from blocked hits. Whatever. The boots are now what? They're the same, basically. They're no longer provide. What do the new gloves do? 30% increase, reduced cooldown rate for throwing in traps and tracks. Those have extra duration. Whatever. 4 max chaos res, but they still have the crush on you. So the helmet. I think all these are kind of bad. Maybe there's like this one seems the most like actually has a use. The helmet. Back to Basics is gone. Unending Nightmare Keystone now has Delirium in your map, has double difficulty scaling. Hold up, I'll burp real quick. No, continue, because how long is this? It's pretty long. Burp real quick, like 1 minute. know what I mean? The Pact with Energy Notable Atlas passive. Now it causes you to gain Soul Fight turds. Oh, it's not a permanent buff on the Soul Fight stuff. It's just a 60-second buff instead. Okay, sure, whatever. Tormented Spirits are less rare versions instead. Whatever. 25% increased item rarity. Wait. Okay, whatever. Your maps have a 10% chance to be haunted by an additional spirit. Okay. Anything that's like a thing that matters. Blight stuff. Monster increased item rarity and quantity. Gubluno, thanks, dude. Then they nerf the player quantity of stacking magic find. Bisco's unique amulet has been temporarily disabled. Aesthetic unique amulet is turned off from the game. Sedima's no longer grants quantity. None of this shit will grant quantity anymore. And it's just basically replaced with rarity. Corpses spawned by the Desecrate and Corpse Walk skills now have a flat 15% chance to match your specters rather than a 15% chance on top of being added to the main pool of corpses varieties that can be picked from. These spectral corpses are now unusable for most purposes and can only be used by minion skills such as Raise Spectre or Bone Offering. Does that actually just completely kill DD? That actually is the, like, complete deletion, isn't it? Like, dead. Like, yeah, like the... I'm not a DD player. I've never even used the skill. But that sounds like a butt pounding for it finally happened. It only took millions of years. Okay. Spectral corpses, blah, blah, blah. This also, does this affect General's Cry too? Am I correct in that? Or does it not matter? No, this doesn't matter, does it? Does it matter? These spectral corpses are now unusable for most purposes. Corpses spawned by Desecrate now have a flat... No, it's fine for General's Cry, right? Yeah, General's Cry doesn't care. Yeah. I was just reading this line, I got confused. Player spawn corpses are no longer affected by modifiers on maps, whatever. Endurance charge, this one's nuts. This change, I think, is probably the most broken change for melee builds. For a lot of melee builds. Like, this is retarded. %4 elemental mitigation per endurance charge. And 4% physical mitigation per endurance charge. Endurance charges are the most broken thing in the fucking game now. Like, what is that? 4%... Not only do you get 4% physical mitigation, but you also get 4%... It's basic... It's borderline 4% damage reduction. It just doesn't affect chaos, right? It affects everything in the game except chaos damage, correct? It's 4% damage mitigation, period, basically, except chaos, right? Isn't that right? Would it be true to say that? It's literally 4% damage mitigation. It even affects dots. It even affects Shaper Beams and dot, damage over time bullshit on the ground. 4% additional damage, elemental damage, yeah. It's so stupid. That's so dumb. Unrelenting is +1/+1 too. From Jug. Is Unrelenting +1/+1 on Jug when I was looking at this? Is that correct? Like, Jug still looked pretty good to me. I was mostly looking at this node because I know it got nerfed. Yeah. So Jug with 10 endurance charges is 50% mitigation basically all the time. And if you use something like Rally Cash, It's absolute, right? It can... Well, no, you still have to generate the charges, right? Yeah, you still have to generate the charges. Regardless, that is retarded. No, it was, yeah, it keeps you at max, yeah. It enables you to play brutality, right? Isn't that right? Isn't that how it works? It's been a couple weeks since I used them. So you can use brutality charges, brutal charges, and you can use... So you get... I don't even know what that is. At 10, it would be 50-50 mitigation, and then you would also get 30% triple damage. It could be time for the Zeppelin Man. Yeah, that's fucking nuts. They buffed dual wield blocking a little bit. See, this looks like... People will see this and they'll think... Wait, is this a buff? Right? I think the order of wording here is incorrect. Am I correct? Was it 15% more attack speed? It was 15% more, like 50% block, right? Yeah. The wording people will look at this and think it was a nerf, but it's actually a buff. It went from 15 to 20 block, and then it was always 10% attack speed as of like 3 years ago before it got nerfed. But this is a buff. It's a small buff, but it's enough to, you know, having 20% evasion essentially is pretty good. It helps. Skills that use a basic melee swing animation, strike animation, now have a more consistent swing timer, okay? Rather than the first swing being slower than the second swing. Is that an actual thing? I have no idea, but okay. You can no longer be stunned while performing a Vol skill, okay. Sure. Skill gem changes. Divine Blessing has been removed. March of the Legion still stays in the game with Divine Blessing, though. Is that correct? March of the Legion is affected by and is now the sole source of this support. Interesting. The following skills no longer have a physical tag. There's a bunch of stuff here, including Cyclone. Interesting. Multi-Strike and Awaken Multi-Strike now describe they cannot support travel skills. They also cannot support some retaliation skills. Okay. Looking for things that matter. Looks like Absolution is where we start. Absolution now has a damage effectiveness at 180, scaling up to 200. So it's like slightly nerfed, I guess, just for leveling for whatever reason. I don't know why it's a thing. Same with that. Ancestral Cry no longer grants a buff which grants bonus, armor, and melee range. Instead, the user and nearby allies gain a buff that grants elemental resistance. 5 res per power, plus 1 max res per 10 power. So this War Cry gives max res per power. So it's plus 3 max res at max power. Bosses are still 20 power. Is that correct? I'm assuming bosses, unique mobs, are still 20 power. So this would be plus 2 max res most of the time in any battle, in any fight that matters. Now has a base duration of 2.5 seconds, scaling to 3.4. That sounds like it doesn't have a 100% time with like some Warcry buff duration or Warcry cooldown reduction. So you need cooldown reduction or buff duration. But also, Warcry buff effect. I don't know how much is available. I'd have to look. I'm not going to look right now, but Warcry buff effect could potentially make this buff stronger also. Remember, this is the buff, right? So it's going to, like, if you know, I don't know how much is available. There's not, it's pretty, like last patch, there wasn't very much, but there might be more in the game. I don't know if you can pump it up more max res to like say 4 or something, hit that threshold, but regardless, max res from a Warcry is interesting. Armageddon brand has been nerfed for leveling, slightly, like 10%, whatever, nobody really cares that much. Armageddon brand of recall, same thing. I don't know why they did this. It's kind of weird. Right? Am I reading this right? It's just, they're just nerfed at low level, but they scale up to the same. I don't know why, but okay, sure. Artillery Ballista, mana cost changes, mana cost changes, mana cost changes, mana cost changes. Bane. Actually buffed, just a small numerical buff. I don't think it really matters. Same with this, the alternate quality. Mana change, mana change. Battle Mage's Cry no longer grants a buff which boosts critical strike chance and allows the user to benefit from spell damage. So that's a nerf to the build, the dual strike build, should be. The buff instead grants 5.5 flat crit per power, up to 2.5 flat crit. Now has a base duration, and that's all it does. So that's just a nerf to dual strike, probably about, I don't remember exactly how much. I'm going to say about 30% nerf. That's about a 30% nerf, I believe. Which is the equivalent of range. Rage. That's it. Rage is basically the same. I'm not tell you. Them changing rage basically counters that. Cool. Berserk no longer grants, no longer provides more damage with attacks, more attack speed, or less damage taken. It now provides 40% increased rage effect. Okay, that's... Wait, what is this? So it's just like your rage gives you more damage. Does that make you degen your rage still? I'm assuming it must. Yeah, it sounds bad. Like, it's good if it doesn't make your character degen rage faster, but I don't know why it wouldn't, because it's not here in the text. But if it does, then it's shit anyway, and nobody's going to use it anyway, I feel like. Unless there's like some crazy rage scaling. Okay. Anyway. First actual melee skill, Blade Flurry. No longer has added a fizz damage, and now has a damage effectiveness base of 61. Previously 32, scaling up to 111. So that is more than a 2 times damage buff, not including the flat fizz, which it had a significant amount. I'm wanting to say it was like 100 something. So that's more than the double buff on Blade Flurry. Same with Incision. This is the crit based one. It doesn't say anything about crit base, it just does more damage. Blade Storm now has a mana gem cost of 10, mana cost of 10, blah blah blah. Blade Storm effectiveness is almost double damage. That's probably not good enough. Blade Storm of Uncertainty, same thing here, about double damage, a little bit less. So it looks like the typical trend here is that melee skills are going to be doing about double damage. What about a good melee skill like Bone Shatter? What happened to that? Scaling up to level 12. Does it have flat fizz? No longer has strike range, but it still has the flat fizz on it, right? Doesn't Bone Shatter have flat fizz on it? I don't fucking remember, honestly. Now it has 231 effectiveness of base and added damage at level 1. Scaling up to 250. Yeah, it should still have its flat. That's like what, 35% more damage, roughly, something like that. I'm like off the top of my head. Is that about right? About 35% more damage. So that's like Bone Shatter, I think, is borderline the exact same. I think Bone Shatter is borderline the exact same damage. Because Protector would give attack speed, which gave you more trauma stacks. So it's not like perfectly linear to other skills, but increasing the damage by 35%, it should be about the same damage. Maybe a little bit less. Carnage is garbage. But they gave it a pretty big buff, honestly. So, effectiveness of base damage, previously 125. Like, previously 275, and now it's 620. That's like a 1.5. But this gem is fucking trash. Whereas, Bone Shatter of Complex Trauma... got the same treatment as base Bone Shatter. Yeah, it's the same. Exact same. Okay. Burning Arrow no longer has added fire damage. Okay, they buffed this actually. I don't know, it's fucking Burning Arrow though. And they didn't change the second version, the version that actually people might use. Call to Arms has been renamed to Auto Exertion. It now reserves 15% mana per supported war cry to cause those war cries to be repeatedly triggered. So you can link a bunch of war cries now to Call to Arms. But the war cries cannot grant buffs or charges to you. So they're just used to cycle through exerts, essentially, right? I don't know how much like use that actually has in practicality, but sure. Because I feel like what was there before was like whatever, honestly. Chain Hook, that's... I'm not even reading Chain Hook. It's not a skill. Anyway, this is not a skill either, to be fair, but... that's like a 1.5 buff. Not quite, right? It's more than a double buff on the... on Charge Dash, but that skill's dog shit. Cleave no longer has flat damage on it. $5.11, that's like another more than double buff. Cleave of Rage. Is there damage on this? Cleave of Rage? I'm confused. Gain 1 rage if the skill hits an enemy, and now has gain 2 rage on attack hit. But where's the damage? Did they forget to put damage on this skill? Because it doesn't do much damage. I'm confused. Okay, so Cleave of Rage is just not worth using, I guess, ever. Cold Snap, just nerf for leveling. Cold Snap of Power, same thing, nerf for leveling. Consecrated Path, not quite a double damage buff, sure. And Consecrated Path of Endurance. This skill, I think, might, like, I'm not gonna say it's good. But is it, like, what? Consecrated Path of Endurance is kind of close to good, right? If I remember right. And it getting a... I don't think that's enough of a buff still, though. I don't think it's enough of a buff off the top of my head. 290, it's like 60%, 70% buff. I don't think it's good enough. Anyway, Crackling Turd. The same thing. Caster, leveling, nerfed. Creeping, Diarrhea, nerf, caster. Cyclone, no longer has flat fizz added. It's so bad. It's so fucking trash still. They couldn't even double buff it, and then they nerf it at the same time by getting rid of the flat fizz. So it's like... shit. Still, not even viable. It's literally, don't play this. It's so fucking bad. Same with this one, the alternate quality one. Defiance Banner, what's it do now? So you have to gain Valor, blah, 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 and then what does it do? Provides 5% more AoE and 5% more aura effect per Valor consumed at gem level 1, both scaling. Banner grants 8% move speed, 8 suppression to you and your allies. -5 damage taken per suppression, up to 12 at level 20. I think it's bad. Nobody wants to rely on a conditional suppression. This seems bad. Nobody wants to rely on a conditional suppression. And then you're dropping your banner to gain movement speed, but then you have to pick your banner back up because it only has so much AoE. This seems dead. This seems really, like, stupid. It's got a conditional suppression. That's nobody wants that. And then it's like a circle of movement speed buff, and then you have to pick it back up. That seems bad. Anyway. Determination has been nerfed, but armor in the game has been buffed on gear. Sure, whatever. Dominating Blow, about a double buff. Dominating Blow, alternate quality, about a double buff. Doriani's Touch now has a 1000 damage effectiveness versus 600. That is, you know, not quite double, but it's a shit skill anyway, so whatever. Double Strike. Triple buff, almost? Is that right? Am I looking at that right? Double Strike is almost a triple buff, but there's no flat fizz on it. That's the biggest skill gem buff I've seen, but this is base Double Strike, and base Double Strike is actually a worthless trash tier dogshit diarrhea smear skill. That being said, Double Strike of Impaling got the same buff, and then Double Strike of Momentum, the single target based one, this one here. Previously 60%, scaling up to 196. It's like a slightly more than double buff. So what's Dread Banner? I don't think Double Strike is very good, but you know, you can probably make it work with these numbers. I mean, most melee skills getting double buffed, you can probably make them work if you really wanted to, but Dread Banner provides 5% more AoE. That's the same thing that's for the banner part. All right, banner grants 4 block. Banner grants life on block. Dude, the banners are dog shit. All right, that banner is it me or like both banners that we looked at just actually worthless dog shit diarrhea trash turds. And they take a skill gem. And they require you to like micromanage. Anyway, dual strike. Oh my god, oh no, it's dual strike league. There's no way they did this. 50% damage buff on dual strike of ambidexterity. It's dual strike league. This is the best skill I've seen by far, right? Scaling up to 360%, 50% more damage. It got nerfed from Battle Mage's Cry, but this is more damage buff than what Battle Mage's Cry lost, but you have to also consider we only used Protector, so we didn't actually use double totems, so we only lost Protector DPS, which was like 20%, right? So you're also going to gain some gem links. I don't even know what you do with those. I'd have to look at the build. Yeah, dual strike of ambidexterity is going to be good still for sure. I don't know how much better it will be, if even much. But dual strike of ambidexterity, that's a thing for sure still. Yeah, it's probably just good. This is probably a top tier melee skill. This is the skill gem that I used last league that was Giga Broken, and it looks even like it looks just as good this league, if not like, you know, whatever other buffs we get. But like Bone Shatter got like a even-ish. Like Bone Shatter's probably about the same. I think this is good. Good, genuinely good territory. Like, that's kind of nasty. 50% more damage. You also save some points on the tree because you don't have to click Battle Mage's thing. You don't have to use the Battle Mage gym either. You probably gain like 5 links on your character. So I don't know what the fuck you do with those, but yeah, this should be pretty good. I don't even know what the fuck you would do with those 5 links. Earthquake of Amplification. Anyway, they nerfed the ailment on the Aftershock. That's funny to me. But they made the Earthquake of Amplification do 50% more damage, a little bit more than 50% damage. Sure. Earth Shatter, double buff. Earth Shatter does twice as much damage now. Is that good? Earth Shatter is pretty good. Earth Shatter is genuinely pretty good, but I don't know if double buffing it makes it, like, it's playable territory for sure. I don't know if it's, like, good territory. Double buffing Earth Shatter, pretty good. I don't know if it's good territory, like top tier territory. Elemental hit is interesting here, right? That's, isn't this the meta skill for bows? And they buffed this for bows also? I'm confused. It's not a big buff, to be fair. Lightning Arrow is still better. Ellie hit is melee only now. Oh, is Ellie hit only melee? They changed it? Yeah. Okay. It looks shit. TLDR. Enduring Cry, what does this do now? The buff grants 2% of life regenerated per second per 5 power. So it's 10 life regen per power, but the duration isn't super long. Benny Newts, what's up, dude? The max res, this is probably the second best cry I've seen. I think the max res one is pretty good too. I guess the flat crit one isn't too bad, but the cries aren't like crazy. The max LE res can be potentially crazy, but this one's like okay, it's fine to use. Additionally, nearby allies players are now granted endurance charges as well as the user. It doesn't say where the endurance charges come from. Is it relative to power still, or can I gain endurance charges with 0 power? I don't know. Am I confused here? It doesn't really tell me where the endurance charges are coming from, what the conditional is. Is it based on like 10 power? Or do you just get 1 endurance charge guaranteed? I don't know. Sunflower. Unless I'm misreading it, I don't see where you get the power, where you get the thing, endurance charge from. Yeah, maybe it's just the same as before. It requires 10 power, I believe. Something like that. I'm not sure. Essence Drain, buff a bit. I don't know if that matters at all, but sure, whatever. EK got the same nerf treatment as all the other spells at low level, whatever. Explosive Diarrhea. Explosive Diarrhea of Destruction. Fireball. Why did they do this to the spell gems? I'm so confused. Like, give it the like damage nerf, whatever. This one looked really good when I glanced at it. 19% less damage taken from nearby enemies at gem level 20, and it has the aura tag, so it's going to scale with aura effectiveness. And if I remember correctly, if I were just to say go here, I could look it up somewhere else, but like, if I remember correctly, where did I do the implicit? Flesh and Stone has this, which, you know, some of these numbers get pretty high, like 30%, 40%. You could Giga buff it. You could probably get, like, that's a lot of damage mitigation in melee range. No, look at normal Earthquake. No, it's 50%. Earthquake 50%. Anyway, Flesh and Stone looks pretty good. Flesh and Stone looks pretty good. 20% more damage. This is a 25% aura. This is a buff to every physical build, right? But it is a... Yeah. Okay. Flicker Strike. I hate this gem. It did get a pretty big buff though. That's like 2.5 times buff almost. I don't know what the exact value is, but it's more than double. A fair bit more than double. Frenzy. So why does base Frenzy not get a damage buff, but Frenzy of Onslaught gets a damage buff? You got the same almost triple, like 2.5 times buff thing. Frostblades got a buff of what? More than double, a little more than double, but has no longer flat cold added. Frenzy of Onslaught only for melee. Sure. Frostbomb, this damage effectiveness shit. Frozen Legion. Somehow it didn't get much of a buff. It's very small. Quinn build login. General's Cry. They nerfed General's Cry? Supported scales now deal 60% less damage, previously 45, scaling to 51% less damage. So they nerfed General's Cry pretty hefty. Interesting. I wasn't even planning on or wanting to play General's Cry build. I hate this skill, but more links freed up means you could probably potentially supplement a General's Cry on a lot of builds, but they buffed that. They nerfed that pretty decent value. Grace got the same thing as Determination. Glacial Hammer. got a pretty big buff. 622 versus 269. It's pretty big. Same with the alternate quality one, the crit one that cycles crit. It did lose its cold, but I mean, pretty big. Ground Slam. About a double buff on Ground Slam. Same with its alternate quality, right? Yeah. Hatred changed, really. No longer causes you and nearby allies to deal more cold damage. You and nearby allies gain 30% of Fizz as extra cold. Scaling up to 39. So Fizz as extra cold. They put it back to kind of like its old version, if I'm correct, right? It doesn't give the just like generic more cold. And it's like made for Fizz as extra cold builds. Builds that start with Fizz ground up and convert. I don't know. I haven't really been playing any Hatred builds, so I haven't had to really run into that. Heavy Strike, not even a double buff, honestly, which is kind of weak in my opinion. Then they changed Herald of Ash no longer grants more spell damage. The buff now grants 15% of Fizz as extra fire, scaling up to 20%. So it's just a little bit better for Fizz as extra fire, and it doesn't buff spells at all. Okay. Yeah, well, it buffs physical baseline spells, similar to Hatred, but no, I didn't even know it had this line, to be honest. No longer buffs, no, it grants spell fire damage. Hex Blast, whatever, got that same damage effectiveness treatment. That seems to be consistent. Ice Crash. Not even a double buff. This skill's garbage dog shit. Not even a double buff. It's not going to be enough. Infernal Blow. A little bit more than a double buff. I never use this skill. I don't even know how good it is. Infernal Cry. They changed this. So what's Infernal Cry do now? So the buff grants 5% of Fizz as extra fire per 5 power. So that's 25 Fizz as extra fire. Combust still does the same thing. My little Combust thing. Combust now has 136, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's just more Herald of Ash kind of stuff. Alright, they changed Intimidating Cry, right? No longer grants a buff. The user... Well, it still does the double damage, right? Is that right? Or... No longer grants a buff. Yeah, normally the buff would lower the physical... It would like overwhelm Fizz, but now it's 3% movement speed per 5 power, up to 30. Sure. But I mean, it still gets the double damage, right? It just doesn't... It wasn't changed also. It doesn't matter. They talked about the attack speed thing on the like some of these like wand skills, right? And then Lacerate melee skill. That's a pretty big buff, 2.5-er-ish. Lacerate of Hemorrhaging might be good. Yeah, it got almost a triple buff. Isn't that the closest gem we've seen to a true triple buff? Like, Lacerate of Hemorrhaging might be an actual thing, but it doesn't have the flat Fizz added. 17 mana cost, yeah, mana. They want you to use mana. Yeah, maybe there's some angle there of bleeding, like gladiator type stuff. This is like a very generic, like obvious way to play. I'm sure it works. I don't know to what, like how good it is, competitive it is, but it'll definitely work. Like anything bleed explosions immediately out the gate is gonna feel pretty good. Like you do your first lab, you get your bleed explosions. You do your second lab, you get the aggravated bleeds guaranteed. Your bleeds are gonna be doing like triple damage immediately right out the gate. Ball double strike. Lancing Steel. It's pretty shit. It was shit and it's still shit. Lancing Steel is big shit. Diarrhea Smear across your forehead. Leap Slam, whatever. Nobody cares about the damage of it. We just use it to move around. Lightning Strike. Like a... What is that? Like a 50% buff, but, you know, countered by totems. It's still Lightning Strike, basically. Molten Burst. Did they change Molten Shell? Molten Shell is now a level 16 gem. Okay, whatever. Who cares? Molten Strike no longer has flat fire added to it. It has not quite double damage buff. And then the Zenith version, which was better, is not quite a double damage buff. So that it's definitely a thing, but it's kind of weird playstyle. Perforate, pretty big. It's got the 2.5 multiplier-ish. Perforate of Bloodshed. 90. That's like almost the triple. Duality. Another big buff. Poisonous Diarrhea, Power Siphon, Puncture. Is this melee only now, Puncture, or does it still a bow thing?
Sunflower.
D4 bad.
Perforate? I don't know. I've never used any of the alternate quality perforates. I don't even know what they look like. I know this one is made for bleeding. I don't remember exactly the text of the skill, but I'll look at it at some point. Rage Vortex. So Rage Vortex of Berserking kind of sucks. But basic Rage Vortex, I don't know what this line is relative. I'm assuming it's fucking dog shit, right? Per 1 rage sacrificed. Previously 5%. I'm pretty sure both Rage Vortexes are just dog shit. Pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure both Rage Vortexes are like bad. Rallying Cry now grants 3% of weapon damage added per 5 power. That's like the same, right? Roughly. Reeve didn't get enough of a buff. Double buff isn't enough for Reeve, honestly. Shit. Seismic Cry. Buff grants 5% more armor per 5 power. Increased stun. Exerted attacks now have a 50% more area of effect. Wait, what? Exerted attacks now have 50% multiplicative more area of effect. Previously, it was just 30% increased area of effect per previous attack exerted. Now exerts 6 slams you perform, previously 4. There's kind of a lot of AoE, and it's consistent. Maybe it's, like, playable. Doesn't give any damage, but having 50% multiplicative AoE makes your shit hit a lot, like, way more, right? Seismic Trap, got that spell treatment. Shattering Steel. Whatever. Shattering Steel of Ammunitions. Okay. Shield Charge, is it good? What about Shield Crush? I mean, it is more numbers, but I don't think it's enough to matter. Smite, more than double buff. Helix. Tiny buff, doesn't matter. Shield throw, Spectral Shield Throw, tiny buff, doesn't matter. Spectral Throw, tiny buff, doesn't matter. Helix is not back at all, unless I misread that. Yeah, it's shit. Alright, anyway. Splitting Steel. No longer has Flat Fizz added. But it has More than 50%. It's not going to be as good as it was 2 leagues ago, for sure. But maybe it's a little bit better than it was last league relative, but like honestly kind of whatever. Sunder? We'll get there. Right in like 2 seconds. Anyway, Sunder. That's gonna be a monster for leveling, right? That is a gross, fucking disgusting leveling skill. That's fucking bullshit. You're gonna have some fucking Omega leveling times easy fucking mode for leveling with that. That's fucking disgusting. 273 at level 1 versus 220. It's gonna do more damage than leveling while dropping totems. And it was already one-shotting in a lot of cases. Like on pretty much everything, so. Tectonic Slam, double buff, not enough. Tornado Shot, mana cost, whatever. Toxic Diarrhea, Unearth, Vigilant Strike. Double buff. Viper Strike of the Mamba, this was used. It's got a big buff, too. Do you think this is the thing now? Anybody who played it? I don't know what all has changed in the past 2 leagues, but that's a pretty big buff for Viper Strike of Mamba. I kind of wanted to try it when the Tinctures were there in Affliction League, but I never got around to making the build. It might be a build, Viper Strike of Mamba. It was a good skill in Affliction League with like the Tinctures and like the poison stuff at max HP and stuff. I don't know all the like interactions, but I did glance at the build at one point. It looked pretty good, but I don't know how good it actually is. But it got more than a double buff, so maybe it's like pretty good. No, I have no idea. Don't know. Never tried it. Snaking. I know some people were using this. It didn't get a double buff though, so it just got like a decent, like hefty, like what is that? Like a little more than like 60% or so buff. Vulnerability now provides attacks against cursed enemies to have a 0 to 10% chance to aggravate bleed. You might be able to hit 100% aggravate bleed without even being a gladiator, and then you don't even need to be a gladiator to play bleed build. I'm just saying. I don't know if that's the thing, but you might be able to do that already. That's a buff. Yes, it is a buff. Yep, that is a buff to vulnerability. War Banner. So this should give damage, right? Banner grants 8% increased accuracy and 4% more melee damage. I feel like the banners are dog shit. Like, alright, here's the thing. The banner is giving you 4% more damage at all gem levels and 8% accuracy. How strong are the banner nodes? I feel like they can't be that strong, right? Like, they gotta be like more than 100% buff effect to make these worth clicking. Like, what does the Valor do for these things? More or effect per Valor consumed. So for every... Okay, I see. So for every 100... Like, what is the baseline cap of Valor? Anybody know off the top of their head? Because I don't know what the numbers are. Maximum of 50. Right? So... How much do you need to make this, like, good mathematically to, like, actually click these? Plus 30 to maximum Valor? 2050. 50, 55? Is that good? 55? I guess it's just roughly competitive with other stuff. Damage nodes, like decent damage nodes, but it's not like good territory, like good territory. It's okay, I guess. I don't think it's anything special. Cursed enemies grant 10 rage while stunned on Warlord's Mark. Whirling Blades, whatever, double buff. Wild Strike, not even a double buff. Vol skill balance. Nothing is jumping out at me like super high. The only thing that was kind of weird to me, all right, here's some support gem changes, was the fact that double strike or dual strike of ambidexterity got as much of a buff as it did seemed weird to me. Supported attacks now deal 10% more damage with bleeding at level 1, chance to bleed. So scaling, so they buff chance to bleed from 19% to 29. It doesn't give flat fizz anymore. I don't think this gem is even that good still. 29% more damage for one gem is not that good. DK, whatever. Earthbreaker. Whatever. Increased duration has been renamed to more duration support. Well, fair. Thanks to you for the resub. Scaling up to 39. So it's multiplicative. Sure.
Sunflower.
My build.
Infused channeling. Supported skills now deal 20% more damage, previously 15. What's the buff? Does infusion buff do something different now? Gain infusion after channeling. Infusion grants 10% more damage of types mastering the tag, while channeling is sort to take 8% less. Whatever. Now causes inspiration. Now causes supported skills to have less mana cost instead of reduced. This also applies to the benefit provided by the quality. Prismatic Diary. I've never even seen someone use that gem. Rage support gem no longer causes attacks to deal added physical damage. What does it do now? Instead, it now grants gain 3 rage on attack hit at all gem levels and causes supported skills to have 10% increased attack speed while you have at least 10 rage. Okay. Shockwave has been buffed by about, what is that, like 50%? Not even, not even. Not a lot percent, like 30% or something. Trauma. Got nerfed. I don't know why, but okay. Trauma's nerfed. That's weird. XD. Supported skills no longer have +2 seconds to cooldown. That has a cost reservation multiplier. Urgent orders. Nobody ever uses that. Berserker got a big shit diarrhea smear across its face. There's like infinite warcry juice on the chieftain. That's interesting. I don't know if that's a thing. Juggernaut lost the Ellie mitigation, but the unrelenting, or the one after unrelenting, I forget what it's called, is OP as fuck. You want die to chaos damage at least, XD. They nerfed attack speed for some reason, I don't know why. 1% per endurance instead of 8. Yeah. So you need some investment to beat it. Champion cannot be stun immune anymore. You have to click the node on the tree. And then Fortify got nerfed on Champion. I don't know why, but sure, whatever. Gladiator looks kind of good. I have to like really like look at it in depth. Rupture stuff is interesting, putting it on a support gem. I didn't like my initial look at Raider, but maybe it's kind of good. The Warden, whatever. Like, it has damage potential, absolutely. For sure, like giga damage, I think. But it has like weird conditionals, so I don't know how they all line up. Ascendant Berserker. Whatever. Ascendant Gladiator. So what does it do now? It now provides 25% chance to aggravate bleed. Gain 50% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. Inherent dual wield bonuses doubling. Deal 1% more damage with hits and elements for every 2 seconds they've been in your presence, up to a maximum of 50%. Yeah, Ascendant Gladiator, this last line is kind of, like, I think this node's really strong on, like, when you actually need character power. I think this Ascendant Gladiator node is pretty strong. How good's the Raider one? The Warden one now, let's see. Attack damage to penetrate 8% resistance, and you can have an additional tincture active. Can only Warden have tinctures? Or can any build have tinctures? I was under the assumption only Warden got tinctures, but is it any build in the game? Okay, so anybody can have tinctures, but Warden can have 2. Okay. And then they changed some of the stuff, Volpact, and then... They actually changed the Impaler. I think it's still dog shit, though. Perfect Agony got changed. More aggravate bleeding. The one additional impact. We saw most of the stuff on this little thing that someone already put up. There's a lot more max res available in the game, especially for the bottom left. The live passive skill mastery that provided plus 50 maximum life now only provides plus 30. Okay. Sure, whatever, fuck you. That will probably never be taken. Sanctuary now grants an additional 1 max res if you're using a shield thingy. Is this better mechanically? I feel like... Yes, that's my initial assumption, but I'm not 100%. I feel like this generically should be better, right? 50% chance to just straight ignore physical mitigation. Then overwhelm 20. Because the physical mitigation rares would have like 50%. Is that correct? They would have like 50% physical mitigation. And so this would effectively, on those mobs, if you just had this and nothing else, be cutting 25 of the resistance. Whereas before it would be 20%. So technically, if you're playing 1-to-1, which most builds were, I think that is a buff. Because most builds would only take 1 wheel. Sometimes you would take 2, but... I think on the stuff that is really punishing, this is most of the pin stuff. I think it's a buff on most. I think most of the time you would run into 50% pin or 50% fizz resistant mobs when it was like really annoying. Anything cool? Bone Breaker gives more AoE, sure. Slaughter Notable gives rage on hit with axes. Some slight number tweaks to some other things, blocking and such. Berserking Notable gives 5 max rage. Buff some leech thingies. Isn't cool. Kinetic impacts. Unique item changes. Adorned has been nerfed. Adorned is 100% at max roll. And it's still 100% variance. So Adorned, still playable, still probably Giga in-game, especially with plus max res being put on jewels. I think it's probably still the best eventually, but it's going to take some work. 0% is big. Defiance of Destiny. Nerfed to 20% from 35. That is a pretty big nerf. Okay. Eternal Damnation now has cannot gain endurance charges and cannot gain power charges. So, Eternal Damnation was like the equivalent of like roughly like 35% elemental mitigation, right? On most builds, it was 35% elemental mitigation. On most builds. Sometimes you might get 36, 37. But 35, 36 probably. I think this is fine. Because I got tired. I was already like, I didn't mind doing it, but I got tired of using Eternal Damnation on almost every build anyway, so I get to have fun using other amulets. So I'm fine with this. My pivot is just going to be play endurance charges. Play endurance charges on your build and have a reliable way to generate them. Will be good. Endurance charges are very good. You probably, in most cases... I'd have to look at the math, but... I would guess around... 4 to 5? Maybe even... Like 4 endurance charges... I think should make you feel about the same tankiness. On most encounters, it's not linear because penetration on certain bosses. Because Eternal Damnation lowered your max res, and then if you play like 4 endurance charges with +5 max res in most cases, you're probably going to feel about the same tankiness, which is like every fucking Bone Shatter build ever, and you know, you can easily get more than that on, say, a Juggernaut or anything else that stacks endurance charges. But I think this is fine. This will be more for builds that don't have access to endurance charges, I guess. But endurance charges are broken. This item is still dog shit. Comb's Heart is trash, diarrhea, smear. Don't get baited. Lethal Pride, unique jewels, that blah, blah, blah. Rage on hit on Lethal Pride, sure. Like, cost of the day, now grants cold damage to retaliation skills, whatever. Perfidy no longer grants double banners. What does it do now? Having a placed banner does not prevent you gaining valor. Whoa, hooray. Hooray. Taste of Hate no longer has 10 to 15% of physical damage from cold damage taken as cold damage during effect. It now has 20 to 30% of fire lightning from hits taken as cold. This item has existed for like 8 years in basically its current iteration, and now it finally got changed. Taste of Turd. It's gone. Taste of Turd. So fire and lightning converted into cold. There's not that many uses where that's going to be really good. Very few. I can't even think of any off the top of my head, Uber-wise. For some reason, can't even think of a lightning Uber ability that penetrates lightning. Is there even one? There's some uses for fire. Exarch. Maven Fireball. But lightning off the top of my head, I don't recall. Eater has no pen. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eater has no attacks that penetrate. So it doesn't do anything there. Am I right? Does Eater of Worlds penetrate any lightning res at all on any of his abilities? I don't think he does, but he might. I don't think so. Just a tiny bit of pen that exists, yeah. Reckless Diarrhea, the little jewels that have block. They buff the values on them, sure, whatever. I don't think they'll really be used, but sure, why not? 6% max, not too bad. Quality stuff, they talked about the changes there. The maximum random quality from tainted armor scraps and tainted blacksmith whetstones is now 20%. So what's the point? Oh, whatever. I get the point, but You got to get all your shit 30% quality before you even consider volleying it or corrupting. What else we got here? The Iron Breaker cluster notable now provides 50% chance to ignore enemy physical damage reduction. That's really good, right? Am I reading this correct? That's nuts. Why did this get buffed so much? So this is normally a 10% overwhelm, but 10% overwhelm converted on the other stuff, everything we've read up to this point, all the stuff on the tree, was 10% overwhelm was roughly like, let me think. I'm wanting to say this, from a mileage perspective, is slightly under twice as good, because this became 35 versus 30. It lost 5% fizz, but it's like typical. So Bastion Breaker, for example, is 20% overwhelm. Bastion Breaker on the tree was 20% overwhelm, which is now 50% overwhelm. But this one was 10% overwhelm, and now it's 50%, meaning it's doubled relative to what is on the tree, where the mileage goes. Meaning this is basically way better, and we already use this. It's way better than what we had. It's so good. It's so good. This is a... I don't know. This didn't follow the math equation that they're using across the board, and it's like way better than the other stuff that is equivalent. That's like giga. That cluster jewel notable is giga now relative to alternatives. Prefix life. 189 at the highest tier. Previously 129. Okay. The suffix modifiers on weapons that provided increased burning damage, increased damage with bleeding, and attack to chance bleeding or increased damage can no longer roll. So there's no bleed modifiers, I guess. Okay, weird. Perfect fossils no longer grant improved quality. It now grants more drop modifiers and no tagless modifiers. How do you get 30 quality then? Can you even in the game? Is 30 quality completely removed? My assumption is 30 quality is completely removed from the game. Where can you get 30 quality? You cannot get it from Betrayal. You cannot get it from corrupted whetstones and armor scraps. You cannot get it from perfect fossils. And you cannot get it from Necropolis because that's not in the game anymore. Beast is the only way, but is Beast... Yeah, random drop maybe? If they remove the Beast, I think it might be 20% quality max in the game again. I don't think you can get... Unless I'm missing a source. I think they just want you to have 20 quality max. Maybe the ships return 30 qual. It just sounds like they want 20 qual to be max. That's what I'm coming to the conclusion. Regular jewels can now roll a suffix modifier for maximum fire, maximum cold, maximum lightning res. That is absurdly strong. And it's a suffix. And suffixes on jewels are way weaker than prefixes on jewels. Prefixes on jewels are so strong. This is a blatant no-brainer that you want max res on your jewel suffixes. So you want your life, max res, whatever filler mods, extra damage mods, whatever. One prefix, one suffix. Rare jewels are absurd just because of this. You can also double buff these with a perfect roll to adorn. It has to literally be a perfect roll to adorn, and then you'll get 2 max res per jewel. But that's pretty nuts. Many modifiers, someone called this and I didn't think it would happen, but it did happen. Whoever called that, you were right. Many modifiers that grant physical damage taken as an element or chaos can no longer roll. This makes endurance charges even more mandatory. I think a lot of people are going to read this and they're going to lose their fucking mind. I'm assuming Lightning Coil is going to be like mandatory on every single build in the entire game, right? Lightning Coil is still the same, I assume. Like, I don't get this. I think this is overkill in a bad way. This is the first thing that I think is too much of a nerf to certain builds I think people are going to lose their fucking mind. If there's something that people are going to lose their fucking minds over, it's this shit. This shit is nuts. This is... Like, where do people get their physical mitigation that don't use endurance charges? Like, genuinely. Like, this is what I don't get and I don't agree with. This is the first thing that stands out, like, as a fucking red alert. Like, where do builds get your physical mitigation that aren't using endurance charges? Where do you get it? That makes no sense to me. Where do you get it? You have to play melee and you have to or use endurance charges. Where do you get your physical mitigation from builds that don't use endurance charges or armor? You can get Fizz as X and Eater chest implicit. Did they add that? They did. So here's one way. New Eldritch implicit modifiers for body armors that grant physical damage taken as an elemental type. Added a new set of modifiers for purity auras that roll a Watcher's Eye to replace the physical damage taken as element above. Essence of Horror. Instead of it being 15% physical damage taken as an element, I just feel like you have to fucking play Lightning Coil in every single build that's not like a generic meathead endurance charge armor build. I'm confused. This one is weird to me. I liked that there were like 4 different solutions to the game finally, like 4 or 5 different solutions it felt like, and you're kind of like weaving parts of them to like get good physical mitigation. And now it feels like this feels like 2 steps back. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we went 2 steps back. Because there were so many different variables and there were so many different solutions to solving your physical mitigation. And I feel like they just cut half of those out of the game. And I think people who are playing Rangers, you know, bow builds, and people who are playing generic caster builds. I mean, this is a change that affects basically every build in the entire game. This is basically a change that affects every single build in the entire game in kind of a bad way. So we're running around with, what's that fucking 20% shield called? Dawmbreakers? Did Dawmbreaker get affected? Dawmbreakers and, hey, I hope your build has Dawmbreaker and, fucking Taste of, or, not Taste of Hate, but that got fucking gutted, Lightning Coil or some shit like that. I don't know. Taste of Hate, or, Dawmbreaker, Lightning Coil, Cloak of Flames. I don't feel like there's very many options. There are solutions, but there's so very few that you're going to just see everybody fucking running around with a Lightning Coil. I feel like that's not playing a generic melee build. That's weird. Corel's signature Veiled modifier is a Warcry buff effect instead of Fizz taken as Ellie. Gravicious mod is now a Banner of Aura effect modifier. There is this. That helps, for sure, but it is on body armors. I don't know if it's red or blue. Red and blue, regardless, the body armor implicits from Eldritch modifiers were very strong. These are like your 40% aura effects and like your generic like 18% all aura effect shit. So I don't fucking know. Whatever. That's a weird one to me. I think people are going to complain about that. I kind of get it. That affects every build in the game. And I don't know. That's a weird one to me. It's 4% from Grand. Yeah, we'll see. Regardless, that's a weird one to me. Anyway, Hunter modifier belt, some Fizz pin overwhelm stuff. These are just Fizz pins in general. Sure, whatever. Corruption jewel modifier, replaced with that. Yeah, sure, whatever. These are all the wands that got changed. Some base crit on daggers got changed, buffed. Crit changes, divination cards, ruthless changes. Are we actually at the end? Monster balance. Pinnacle bosses, Shaper, and Elder Guardians can now have up to 50% action speed reduction, previously 30%, which buffs the effective freeze on these bosses. Hey, I guess, whatever. I'll like, I think it's dumb when the boss is so fucking slow that he can't hit you, but sure. That's yeah, that's nuts. I think that's like, if you're playing a chill and Tim Chains build, like, what's the boss? The boss is AFK. I don't know what to tell you. The boss is fucking AFK. Is that a buff to Jug? I think this is a buff to Jug. Rare monsters that overwhelmed big, 30%. Is a pretty annoying mod sometimes if you find it like some Giga Juice map. Crush debuff is only 15%, right? But it's all the monsters doing it to you now once the debuff is applied. But I think it's ultimately gonna still, that's ultimately a buff. The ultimatum, no, the expedition. Yes, it's here. What's it do now? Now causes monsters to ignore physical damage reduction. Fuck you. Nerf this! This shit's just, if I accidentally click this, my character dies. Why? You found the thing and then you left it. You found the thing and then you left it. This just kills players instantly. Anyway, whatever. Unrelenting Timeless, Vault emblems no longer cause enemies to overwhelm 4% fizz, penetrate, blah blah blah. They instead cause enemies to deal 10% increased damage. It's probably better. Revenant, monsters now use the shared explosion telegraph used by monster corpses. Okay. We might have died to this last league. It's possible, this exact thing. And now it will be more telegraphed. I guess. I'll still find a way to die to DD this league. I've died to DD like 3 leagues in a row now, but I don't, like, if it happens, it happens. I don't fucking care. Whatever. They changed the bandit rewards. Sure, cool. Whatever. Some bug fixes. Some minor stuff. Who's this guy? I don't know, but cool.
Hulk knows overwhelm.
I need to digest and we'll look through this stuff again. I'll do a lot of it probably tomorrow. The one thing that stood out to me the most, surprisingly, of everything, was dual strike of ambidexterity is obviously still super fucking strong. Which I consider the best melee skill of last league and the best melee skill that I think I've seen in the past like 5 years. It's that good. And it got a 50% buff, but it lost totem damage. Only Protector. It didn't benefit from War Chief. It lost Protector, and it lost Battle Mage's Cry, but you gained some passive points. Ultimately, it's probably stronger this league coming, and it's going to be stronger versus competition, other builds, because it's played on a Juggernaut, and Juggernaut gets a bazillion endurance charges anyway. So this stands out to me blatantly as the strongest melee skill. I don't know how good the bleed stuff is. We'll look at some of that later. I'm not going to look at that right now, but, you know. If I were a betting man, this is probably the best skill in the game for melee. I'm not going to say of everything. This shit is nuts. Shield Crush can... I fucking wouldn't wipe my ass with Shield Crush. This... Dual Strike of Ambidexterity. Unless I'm missing something. Like it got nerfed in some other way, or whatever the fuck. This shit is nuts.